What if I told you that the most successful creatives of our time aren't necessarily the most talented, but the ones who mastered one simple skill that most artists are terrified to practice? They've learned to share their work while they're making it, not after it's perfect. And this revelation is about to change everything you think you know about creativity and success. Austin Kleon's Show Your Work isn't just another creativity book. It's a manifesto that flips the traditional artist's playbook on its head. While most creatives hide away in their studios, waiting for that perfect moment to reveal their masterpiece, the artists who actually build careers and find their audiences are doing something completely different. They're sharing their process, their failures, their daily discoveries, and their half-finished ideas with the world. But here's where it gets interesting. This isn't about shameless self-promotion or becoming an attention-seeking social media addict. This is about something much more profound: the death of the lone genius myth and the birth of what Kleon calls genius. For centuries, we've been sold this romantic image of the isolated genius. Mozart composing alone, Einstein theorizing in solitude, Picasso painting in his secret studio. But this narrative is not only false, it's destructive. The reality is that great ideas emerge from communities of creative individuals who support each other, share ideas, steal from each other, and build upon each other's work. Think about it. Every creative breakthrough you admire happened within a scene. The Beatles didn't emerge from a vacuum. They came from Liverpool's vibrant music scene. Silicon Valley's innovations spring from a network of interconnected minds. Even Leonardo da Vinci was part of Florence's artistic community. This is where genius comes in. It's the genius of the whole scene, not just the individual. And the beautiful thing about our digital age is that you don't need to be in Florence during the Renaissance or Liverpool in the 60s to be part of a genius. The internet has created global scenes where anyone can contribute, learn, and grow. But here's the catch, and this is where most people get stuck. You have to show up as an amateur first. Not in the sense of being unprofessional, but in the true meaning of the word. Someone who does something for love, not money or fame. Amateurs have a massive advantage because they have nothing to lose. They're willing to experiment, to fail publicly, to ask stupid questions, and to share their learning process. Remember when you first discovered something you were passionate about? You probably consumed everything you could find about it, shared your excitement with anyone who would listen, and weren't afraid to be seen as a beginner. That's the amateur spirit Kleon is talking about. It's about retaining that curiosity and openness even as you develop expertise. The magic happens when you start thinking about process instead of just product. Most people only see the finished painting hanging in the gallery, but they never see the artist mixing colors, making mistakes, starting over. They see the polished book on the shelf, but never witness the writer's daily struggle with blank pages and terrible first drafts. When you share your process, something remarkable happens. People don't just see your work, they see you as a human being. They connect with your struggles, celebrate your breakthroughs, and become invested in your journey. This creates a relationship that goes far deeper than simply admiring a finished product. But how do you actually do this without becoming that annoying person who shares every mundane detail of their day? Kleon has a simple rule: share something small every day. Not your lunch, not your latte, but your work. Document what you're learning, what you're discovering, what problems you're trying to solve. Think of it as becoming a documentarian of your own creative process. Take photos of your workspace, write about the books that are influencing you, share the tools you're experimenting with, talk about the challenges you're facing. Over time, these daily dispatches create a narrative of your growth and development. Here's where it gets really powerful. This isn't just about building an audience, it's about building your own external brain. When you share your process regularly, you start to see patterns in your own thinking. You notice themes emerging. You can look back and see how ideas evolved over time. Your social media presence becomes less about broadcasting and more about thinking out loud. And speaking of social media, Kleon emphasizes that while these platforms are useful, you need to own your own corner of the internet. Buy a domain name, start a website, create your own digital headquarters. Social media platforms come and go, but your own website is forever. It's your creative laboratory, your portfolio, your writing studio, and your storefront all rolled into one. Now, let's talk about one of the most misunderstood aspects of sharing your work, what Kleon calls opening your cabinet of curiosities. Before you're ready to share your own creations, you can start by sharing your taste. What influences you? What books are you reading? What art moves you? What music inspires your work? Your influences are actually more revealing than you might think. They show people who you are and what matters to you. They also help you find your tribe, the people who love the same things you love. But here's the crucial part. When you share someone else's work, you must give proper credit. Not just because it's ethical, but because attribution creates connections. It leaves breadcrumbs that lead people back to the source and helps them discover more great work. This brings us to one of the most important lessons in the book, the power of storytelling. Your work doesn't exist in a vacuum, and it doesn't speak for itself. Every email you send, every caption you write, every conversation you have about your work is part of a larger narrative you're constructing about yourself and your creative journey. The best part? You don't need to be a natural storyteller to do this well. Most stories follow predictable structures. There's a problem, work done to solve the problem, and a solution. There's a beginning where you establish what you want, a middle where you encounter obstacles, and an end where you achieve your goal or learn something valuable from the attempt. But here's where Kleon gets really practical. What do you actually say when someone asks what you do? If you're an artist, a writer, a musician, or anyone doing creative work, you've probably stumbled through this conversation more times than you'd like to admit. The key is to explain your work simply and honestly. You should be able to describe what you do to a kindergartner and a senior citizen with equal clarity. And please, for the love of creativity, never call yourself a ninja, guru, or rock star in your bio. You're a photographer, a designer, a writer. State the facts without the fluff. Now, let's address the elephant in the room, criticism. When you put your work out there, people will have opinions. Some will be helpful, others will be harsh, and some will be downright cruel. Kleon's advice? Learn to take a punch. The way to handle criticism is not to avoid it, but to build up your tolerance for it. Put out more work, get hit more often, and develop thicker skin. Not all criticism is worth listening to, especially from people who don't care about you or your work, but the feedback from people who are genuinely invested in your success. That's gold. And here's something most people don't consider. Teaching what you know is one of the most powerful ways to share your work. The moment you learn something new, turn around and teach it to others. Create tutorials, share your reading list, explain your techniques. Teaching doesn't diminish your expertise, it amplifies it. Plus, you'll learn more by teaching than you ever did by just doing. But what about money? Surely all this sharing and giving away of knowledge makes it harder to earn a living from your work, right? Actually, it's the opposite. When you build an audience through generous sharing, you create a group of people who are invested in your success. They want to support you, and many are willing to pay for your work, your services, or your products. The key is not to be afraid of asking for money when you have something valuable to offer. Don't apologize for charging for your work. Price it fairly, but don't undervalue it either. And always be collecting email addresses from people who are interested in what you do. Email might seem old-fashioned, but it's one of the most reliable ways to stay connected with your audience over time. Here's one of my favorite insights from the book, the concept of stock and flow. Flow is your daily social media updates, your tweets, your Instagram posts. Stock is the durable content that's just as valuable 2 years from now as it is today. The magic happens when you use your flow to build your stock. Those daily shares and observations can become blog posts, which can become chapters, which can become books. Kleon himself is a perfect example of this. Many of the ideas in Show Your Work started as tweets, evolved into blog posts, and eventually became this book. Small things over time can become big things. But what about the dark side of putting yourself out there? Not everyone online has good intentions. There are trolls, critics, and energy vampires who will try to drain your enthusiasm and derail your progress. Kleon's advice is simple. Protect your energy. Use the block button. Delete nasty comments. Don't engage with people who aren't interested in making your work better. He calls this the vampire test. If spending time with someone leaves you feeling drained and depleted, they're a vampire. If you feel energized and inspired after the interaction, they're not. Apply this test to people, projects, and even platforms. Life's too short to let vampires suck your creative energy. Now, let's talk about the long game. Building a creative career isn't about overnight success. It's about persistence and showing up consistently over time. The most successful creative people aren't necessarily the most talented. They're the ones who stick around long enough to get good and build an audience. Kleon introduces the concept of chain smoking, using the end of one project to light up the next. Instead of taking breaks between projects, waiting for feedback, or wondering what's next, you move directly from one piece of work to another. This keeps you in motion and prevents the career stalls that kill so many creative dreams. But sometimes you do need a break. When you feel burned out or stuck, it might be time for a sabbatical, a deliberate period of stepping back to recharge and find new inspiration. This doesn't have to be a year-long retreat. It could be a daily walk, a weekly digital detox, or a monthly camping trip. The key is to regularly disconnect from your work so you can return to it with fresh perspective. And here's something that might surprise you. Sometimes the best thing you can do for your career is to start over. Not literally, but spiritually. When you've mastered something and feel like you've learned all you can from it, it's time to become a beginner again. Throw out your old material, challenge your assumptions, and dive into something completely new. This isn't really starting over because you never lose the lessons you've learned. They seep into your new work, making it richer and more complex. Think of it as beginning again, going back to that amateur spirit that made you fearless when you were just starting out. The most successful creatives understand that their career is not a single story with a neat beginning, middle, and end. It's a series of chapters, each building on the last but distinct in its own right. Some chapters will be better than others. Some projects will succeed wildly, others will fail spectacularly, and most will fall somewhere in between. The key is to keep showing up, keep sharing, keep learning, and keep connecting with people who care about the same things you do. Success in the creative world isn't about creating one perfect thing and coasting on it forever. It's about building a body of work, a community of supporters, and a reputation for consistent, generous sharing over time. And perhaps most importantly, it's about changing your relationship with your work itself. When you share your process, when you teach what you know, when you connect with others who are on similar journeys, your work becomes less about ego and more about service. You're not just creating for yourself anymore. You're creating for a community of people who are rooting for you and learning from you. This shift from self-promotion to generous sharing is what makes all the difference. Instead of shouting, "Look at me," you're saying, "Look at this interesting thing I discovered." Instead of hoarding your knowledge, you're giving it away freely, trusting that more will come. Instead of waiting until you're an expert to share your insights, you're learning and teaching simultaneously. The beautiful paradox of showing your work is that the more you give away, the more you get back. The more generous you are with your knowledge, the more people want to support you. The more human and vulnerable you are about your process, the deeper connections you make with your audience. This isn't just about building a career. It's about building a creative life that's sustainable, fulfilling, and connected to something larger than yourself. In a world where we're increasingly isolated by technology, showing your work becomes an act of human connection. It's a way of saying, "I'm here, I'm working on something, and I'd love for you to be part of the journey." So here's your homework. Start documenting what you do. Share something small tomorrow. Find your scene online and contribute to it. Stop waiting for permission or the perfect moment. Stop hiding your process and start showing your work. Because in the end, the creative life isn't about creating in isolation and hoping someone eventually discovers your genius. It's about building relationships, sharing generously, learning constantly, and creating a body of work that serves others while fulfilling yourself. Your work is already happening. The question is, are you brave enough to show it? The time for hiding is over. The world needs what you're working on, even if it's not perfect yet. Especially if it's not perfect yet. Show your work, find your people, and build the creative career you've always dreamed of, one daily share at a time.